What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for Sports. So, once again, Shaq, who sometimes gives flowers to the other great centers, on his podcast, I think yesterday, stated that he feels he's the greatest center of all time, meaning that he thinks he's greater than Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Wilt Chamberlain, and I guess Bill Russell. And he said, and I'll put a link to this article in the pinned comment in the comment section below. He says the reason why he is uh, the greatest center of all time, why he puts himself above those guys, is because, quote, I took it to another level, right? And what I'm assuming he's talking about is his performances in the finals, okay? I'm assuming that's what he's talking about. The three championships, the three finals MVPs, the dominance, I get all of that. And he was. You got to admit, that 3 year span in those finals, Shaq was a force that we had not seen before in recent memory. But I do want to say this. Many people get on Wilt Chamberlain for not being. Someone just the other day said, well, why is it that Wilt averaged 30.1 points per game during the regular season, but only 22.5 points per game during the playoffs? So he just didn't bring it. And you know, you try to explain these things, but it's like talking to a wall. It's like talking to a wall. When I say that out of the 160 playoff games that Wilt had, 88 of them came as a Laker when he was a third and fourth option, which was bringing down his scoring average. The same thing happened to Oscar Robertson. Oscar Robertson, his playoff numbers look inferior to his regular season numbers on a per average basis, but it's because he played a lot of playoff games as a member of the Milwaukee Bucks when he wasn't uh, Mr. Do It All on the court. But I want to say something to further my point about this, though. Shaq, yes, you were very dominant, but let's not forget who you were going against in these finals. Okay? The best team that you played during that span was the Pacers. And that wasn't even the best Pacer team, in my opinion. The best Pacer team was the 98 Pacer team. And probably would have been a 2004-5 Pacer team had it not been completely obliterated because of the malice at the palace, right? Then you were going up against an old ass, broke foot Rick Smits, which is, I mean, you know, come on. Now, Rick Smits at his peak was a borderline all star center, okay? And that's only because the level of center play was a lot greater than. He had great centers. Today, he'd be an all star center. But you were going up against this guy not in 1995, but 2000 when his feet were fucked up. He always had bad feet, but by that time, that matter of fact, the finals was the last NBA games that Rick Smith played. Rick Smith played before he retired. And then the next year, you go against Todd McCullough in a broken down. Well, I'm not going to say he was broken down, but he was a past his prime to Kim Batum. Okay, and he went up against a Sixers team that, despite all of the praise and accolades we put on Allen Iverson, that's not one of the great teams of all times, and we know that. And then he went up against a Nets team. Come on. He went up against this next team whose starting center was the Kimbe's backup with the Sixers, Todd McCullough. Todd McCullough? Todd McCullough. Meanwhile, Kareem is going up against guys like Moses Malone and Bill Laimbeer and Robert Parrish, Akeem Olajuwon, Ralph Sampson. You're going up against Todd McCullough. Wilt is going up against, Nate Thurman and Bill Russell, Willis Reed. You're going up against Todd McCullough. You go up against a Rick Smith who could barely move his feet around the court. And I'm not even going to get into the fact that during Wilt's era, in Shaq's time, he was allowed to offensive foul to death. Bury that shoulder right into his opponent, which was a sure enough offensive foul back in the 1960s. Let Wilt Chamberlain, who could bench press 600 pounds in his prime, or at least 500 pounds by the mid-60s at least, let him be able to do that and see how many points he would average. Allow him to have the freedom to do what you were able to do, to be physical, to use his strength, use his physical advantages, his athleticism, and let's see what Wilt Chamberlain could have did in the 1990s. Now I understand. See, when I was a teenager, back in 1997 and 96 when Wilt was boasting, I said, Wilt just talking shit, Wilt wouldn't do all of that. But I'm going to be honest with you. Knowing what I know about the game of basketball now from a rules perspective, for what they could do in the 60s and couldn't do, and what they could do in the 90s, and what they let Shaq get away with, there's no doubt in my mind that if Wilt Chamberlain had the green light to shoot the basketball 30 times, not 40 times, 30 times a game, the way that they play the game now, I think he would have averaged 50 points a game back then. The reason being, because he went to the foul line 18 times a night. Even if he only made 9, it's 50%. It's 9 points coming from the foul line. 30 shots a game. He would have converted probably 2/3 of those shots. So that's 20 points. That's 40 points coming off from field goals, plus 9 from the free throw. That's damn near 50 right there. He would have been unstoppable. If all he had to do was just use his physical strength and score. If he's within 5 feet from the basket, it's a sure enough score. What you gonna do? Foul him? Either you're gonna foul him or he's gonna score on you. He's gonna foul out your entire fucking front line. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, when he was winning in the 80s, he was part of a system. It wasn't just Kareem getting the ball. But Kareem, when he was 40 years old, Shaq was still kicking some of the elite players' asses. This guy was 39 years old and still averaging 23 points a game in 87. When you were 39 years old, Shaq, you were done. You were done. You ran up the court and got injured. No contact. So I'm really having some issues with this shit with Shaq, man. Shaq used to be a little better with this. Shaq is I don't know what's going on. Maybe he feels like people aren't giving him enough flowers. Look, Shaq is in my opinion, somewhere around a top 10 all-time player, top 12. He's somewhere in that range. All right? According to Shaq, maybe that's not good enough. I'm sorry. That's how most people see it. The NBA let Shaq get away with a lot of shit that other centers were not as. Look, you ever notice when you look at highlights of Wilt in his prime, it's almost never dunks. and you didn't really start seeing that until you played with the Lakers. You want to know why that's the case? Is it wasn't until I'd say 1969ish, 1968 that the league started allowing more room for centers to do their things offensively. Um, Before that, it was a lot more difficult because of the rules for centers to do certain things, like as far as being in the paint, and the game was becoming more offensive friendly. Is what I'm trying to say by the 1970s. It's becoming a lot more offensively friendly, and that's part of why field goal percentages shot up by the late 60s, early 70s, as opposed to before, say, the late 60s. Field goal percentages were so down because defenses had a lot of advantages. You could used to be able to double hand check. They got rid of that. You used to be able to use both your hands in positioning a player, not just one, but both. There's a lot of shit people don't know about the old NBA, you know. But anyway, tell me what you guys think.